The stranger collapsed face first into the dirt just as Isaac Crawford reached for his cabin door, her body crumpling like a marionette with cut strings, and he barely caught her before her head struck the wooden step. Blood stained the back of her dress, dried dark against faded calico, and her breathing came shallow and rapid. Isaac hoisted her into his arms, surprised by how light she was, all bones and determination worn down to nothing. He kicked the door open and carried her inside, laying her carefully on his narrow bed. The August heat of 1882 pressed through the cabin walls, making the small space feel like an oven, but the woman shivered as though winter had come early to the Nevada territory. He worked quickly, his hands steady from years of tending injured cattle and horses. The wound on her back was not from a bullet as he had first feared, but a deep gash, infected and angry. Someone had tried to stitch it closed with clumsy hands, and the thread had torn through swollen flesh. Isaac heated water on his stove, gathered clean cloth, and set about cleaning the wound properly. She did not wake, even when he had to reopen the infected area and drain it. Her face, streaked with dust and sun-darkened, looked younger than he had first thought. Maybe 25, maybe younger. Dark blonde hair escaped from a braid that had come half undone days ago. Isaac cleaned the wound 3 times before he was satisfied, then stitched it with careful precision, the way his mother had taught him before cholera took her when he was 15. That was 17 years ago now, and he had been alone ever since, choosing solitude over the chaos of towns like Las Vegas, 5 miles to the south. He preferred his cattle, his land, and the quiet that came with both. The woman's pulse fluttered weak beneath his fingers when he checked her wrist. Fever burned through her skin. He spent the next hour bathing her face and arms with cool water, then mixing up a broth from beef bones he had been saving. The soup simmered on the stove as darkness fell outside, filling the cabin with rich, savory smell that seemed almost obscene given the circumstances. Isaac pulled his chair beside the bed and settled in to watch. He had no intention of sleeping. The woman was too sick, her breathing too unsteady. If she took a turn, he needed to be awake to help. He spooned small amounts of broth between her lips every hour, and was relieved when her throat worked to swallow even in unconsciousness. The night stretched long. Isaac kept himself occupied by whittling a new handle for his axe, the blade moving in careful strokes that would have been meditative if not for the tension coiling in his shoulders. Every few minutes his eyes flicked to the woman, checking the rise and fall of her chest, watching for any change in her breathing. Around midnight, she began to mumble, words too soft and jumbled to understand. He moved closer, pressing the back of his hand to her forehead. The fever had not broken, but it had not worsened either. He counted that as a small victory. By the time dawn light began creeping through the cabin's single window, Isaac felt the weight of sleeplessness pressing against his eyes, but he remained alert. He had made a pot of coffee sometime around 3 in the morning, strong and bitter, and it coursed through his veins now. He reheated the soup, then returned to his vigil. The woman's eyes opened just as the sun cleared the eastern hills. She stared at the rough wooden beams of the ceiling for a long moment, her brow furrowing. Then her gaze shifted, taking in the unfamiliar cabin, the man sitting beside the bed, the bowl of soup in his hands. Fear flashed across her face and she tried to sit up, gasping as the movement pulled at her wound. "Easy," Isaac said, his voice rough from disuse. "You are safe. You collapsed outside my door yesterday evening." She searched his face, her eyes a startling shade of green that reminded him of new spring grass. Slowly, deliberately, she looked around the cabin again, as though cataloging every detail, every potential threat or escape route. Her hand moved beneath the blanket he had covered her with, checking, and he saw the moment she realized someone had tended her wound. "Who are you?" Her voice came out as barely more than a whisper, dry and cracked. "Isaac Crawford. This is my land, my cabin. You are about 5 miles north of Las Vegas." He held up the bowl. "You need to eat. You have fever from infection, and you have not had food or water in some time if I am judging right." She stared at the soup like it might be poisoned, then her stomach betrayed her with a loud growl. Isaac saw her face color slightly. "I will eat some first if that helps," he offered, bringing a spoonful to his own mouth. The broth was simple but good, salted well and rich with beef. He swallowed, then offered her the spoon. She hesitated, then nodded. He helped her sit up, propping pillows behind her back, and she took the bowl with trembling hands. The first spoonful went down slowly, then the second came faster. She had eaten half the bowl before she spoke again. "How long have I been here?" "Since sunset yesterday." "It is morning now, just past dawn." She looked at him, really looked at him, taking in the lines around his eyes, the dark hair that needed cutting, the calloused hands. "You stayed awake all night," Isaac shrugged, uncomfortable with the intensity of her gaze. "You were sick. Someone needed to watch." "Why?" The question came out flat, suspicious. "You do not know me. I could be anyone." "You could be," he agreed. "But you were hurt and you needed help. That is enough reason." She returned her attention to the soup, finishing it in silence. When the bowl was empty, she handed it back to him, and he saw that her hands had stopped shaking quite so badly. "Thank you," she said, the words seeming to cost her something. "I should go. I have imposed enough. You have a fever and an infected wound that I spent 3 hours cleaning last night. You are not going anywhere for at least a few days." Isaac stood, taking the bowl to his wash basin. "I will make more soup. You can tell me your name when you are ready, and you can tell me what happened when you are ready or not at all. But you will stay until you are well enough to ride. That is final." He expected her to argue, but when he glanced back, she had slumped against the pillows, her face pale. The brief surge of strength had exhausted her. "Eliza," she said quietly. "Eliza Barrett, and I was not riding, I was walking." Isaac nodded, filing away that information and the dozen questions it raised. "Well, Eliza Barrett, you are welcome to my bed for as long as you need it. I will take the floor. I cannot take your bed, you already have." He poured water into a tin cup and brought it to her. "Drink this, then rest. We can talk more later." She took the water, sipping carefully, and watched him move around the small cabin with an expression he could not quite read. Exhaustion won out quickly, though, and her eyes drifted closed before she finished the cup. Isaac took it from her slack fingers and pulled the blanket up to her shoulders. Then he finally allowed himself to sit in his chair and close his eyes, just for a moment, while the morning sun climbed higher in the sky. He woke to find Eliza watching him, and from the angle of light through the window, he had been asleep for several hours. Isaac straightened in his chair, wincing as his back protested. "You should have used the bed," Eliza said. Her voice was stronger now, less thread. "I was taking it anyway. I have slept in worse places." Isaac stood, stretching carefully. "How do you feel?" "Like I was stabbed in the back and then walked through a desert." A hint of dry humor colored her words, which I suppose is accurate enough. Isaac moved to check her forehead. The fever had broken, her skin merely warm now instead of burning. "That is good. The fever is down. Are you hungry?" "Yes, actually." He prepared another bowl of soup, larger this time, and watched as she ate. Color had returned to her cheeks, and she held the bowl steady without his help. "You said you were walking," he prompted gently. "From where?" Eliza was quiet for a long moment, the spoon pausing halfway to her mouth. Then she lowered it slowly. "From a marriage I should never have agreed to, from a man who thought his wife was property to be disciplined." Her eyes met his, hard as flint. "He gave me this wound when I told him I was leaving. I left anyway." Isaac felt anger stir in his chest, cold and controlled. "Where is he now? Las Vegas, I assume, or out looking for me?" She said it matter-of-factly, but he saw her hand tighten on the spoon. "His name is Marcus Webb. He owns a saloon on the main street. Half the men in town drink there and the other half owe him money. No one will help me against him." "Did you go to the sheriff?" Eliza laughed, bitter and sharp. "The sheriff drinks for free at Marcus's saloon." "Who do you think held me while Marcus used his knife?" She saw Isaac's expression and shook her head. "That is the world, Mr. Crawford. At least it is for women like me, who made the mistake of trusting the wrong man." Isaac pulled his chair closer to the bed and sat down, his elbows on his knees. "How long were you married?" 4 months. "We courted for 2 before that. He seemed kind at first, generous. He said pretty things." She stared into her soup. "The mask came off about a week after the wedding." "By then it was too late." "It is not too late now." She looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" "I mean you got away. You are alive. That is not too late." Isaac leaned back. "You can stay here as long as you need. Marcus Webb does not come out this way. I have no business with him or his saloon, and he has no reason to think you would come to a stranger's cabin. You do not know what he is like." Eliza's voice dropped. "He will search. He considers me his property, stolen goods that need to be recovered. And when he finds me, he will kill whoever helped me. Then he had better not find you." Isaac stood and moved to the window, looking out at his land. 20 acres of scrub and struggle, carved out of nothing through years of work. His cabin was small but solid, his barn adequate for his 3 horses and dozen head of cattle. He lived simply and he lived alone, and he liked it that way. But the woman in his bed had collapsed at his door, literally, and he was not the kind of man who turned away from someone in need. "How did you find this place?" "I did not find it. I was just walking, trying to get distance between me and town. I walked all night the night I left and all the next day. Somewhere along the way the wound got infected. I kept walking anyway. I remember seeing your cabin in the distance, thinking maybe someone there would give me water. Then I remember waking up here. You walked for nearly 2 days with that wound." "I had to." Simple words carrying the weight of desperation. Isaac turned from the window. "You should rest more." "I need to tend my animals, but I will be nearby. If you need anything, there is a bell on the table beside the bed. Ring it and I will hear." Eliza nodded, already sinking back into the pillows. The soup bowl sat empty in her lap, and Isaac took it gently before heading outside. The afternoon heat hit him like a physical force. August in Nevada was unforgiving, all blazing sun and dry air that sucked the moisture from anything living. His cattle clustered in the shade of the barn, and his horses stood drowsing in their corral. Isaac went through his routine tasks with mechanical efficiency, his mind elsewhere. He thought about Eliza's story, about Marcus Webb and a sheriff who held women down while their husbands carved into them. Rage simmered under his skin, carefully controlled. Isaac had never been a violent man, but he had also never been tested quite like this. The idea of someone hunting Eliza, of dragging her back to that life, made his hands curl into fists. He finished with the animals and checked his perimeter, looking for any sign of riders or disturbance. Nothing but empty land and heat shimmer. Still, he made a mental note to be more vigilant. If Webb came looking, Isaac needed to see him coming from a distance. When he returned to the cabin, Eliza was asleep again, her breathing deep and even. Isaac prepared a proper dinner, venison from a deer he had shot 3 days prior, with beans and the last of his bread. The smell of cooking meat filled the cabin, and Eliza stirred as the sun was setting. "That smells incredible," she said, her voice still rough but stronger than before. "Can you stand? You should try to move a bit if you are able." Eliza pushed herself up carefully, testing her limits. Isaac moved to help her, offering his arm, and together they got her to her feet. She swayed for a moment, gripping his arm hard, then steadied. He walked her slowly to the table, all of 3 steps from the bed, and helped her into the other chair. "How does the wound feel?" "Like someone stuck a knife in me," she said, but there was less pain in her voice than he expected. "But better than yesterday. Whatever you did, it worked." "Basic field medicine. Nothing special." Isaac served the food, giving her a generous portion. "You need to rebuild your strength." They ate in companionable silence for a while. Isaac found himself studying her face in the lamplight. Cleaned up and rested, Eliza was pretty in an understated way. Strong jaw, straight nose, those remarkable green eyes. But more than that, there was intelligence there and a kind of steel that came from surviving hard things. "Why do you live out here alone?" she asked suddenly. Isaac considered his answer. "I like the quiet. I like working with my hands, building something that is mine. Towns are too complicated, too many people with too many agendas. Lonely, though." "Sometimes," he admitted, "but loneliness is better than being surrounded by people and still feeling alone." Eliza nodded slowly, understanding in her eyes. "Yes, yes, it is." After dinner, Isaac helped her back to bed, then took his bedroll and laid it on the floor near the door. Eliza protested, but he waved her off. "I am a light sleeper. If anyone approaches, I will hear them. This is the best position." She did not argue further, too tired to fight. Within minutes, she was asleep again. Isaac lay awake longer, listening to the night sounds, his rifle within easy reach. He had not been lying about being a light sleeper. Any unusual sound would wake him instantly. But the night passed quietly, and morning came with birdsong and golden light. The next 3 days fell into a rhythm. Isaac tended his land and animals during the day, always staying within earshot of the cabin. Eliza rested and healed, her strength returning in steady increments. By the 4th day, she was able to walk around the cabin without assistance, and by the 5th, she insisted on helping with small tasks. "I cannot just lie in bed while you do everything," she said, standing at his stove and stirring a pot of beans. "I will lose my mind." Isaac watched her from his chair where he was mending a bridle. "Your wound needs time to heal." "My wound is healing fine. You did good work." She glanced at him over her shoulder. "Where did you learn to stitch like that?" "My mother." She was the closest thing to a doctor we had in our town growing up. People came from miles around when they were sick or hurt. The memory was old but still tender. "She made me practice on scraps of leather until I could make stitches small and even. Said it was an important skill for a man to have." She was right. Eliza turned back to the beans. "What happened to her?" "Cholera when I was 15. Half the town died that summer. I am sorry." Isaac shrugged, though the gesture felt hollow. "It was a long time ago." "Does not make it hurt less, though." Eliza spoke from experience, he could tell. "I lost my parents when I was 19. Different sickness, same result. That is how I ended up in Las Vegas, actually. I was trying to get to California to my aunt, but I ran out of money. I took work at a boarding house, met Marcus, thought I had found a way forward." She laughed without humor. "Some way forward. You are still young. There is time to find a better way." "I am 24. Not so young anymore, especially not for a woman." 24 is plenty young," Isaac said firmly. He was 32 himself, which felt ancient some days and young on others, depending on his mood. "And you have your whole life ahead of you still. You will find your way." Eliza did not answer, but something in her expression softened. That evening, they sat outside as the sun set, watching the sky turn brilliant shades of orange and pink. The heat of the day was finally breaking, and a slight breeze carried the smell of sage and dust. Isaac had brought out 2 chairs and they sat in comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts. "You ever go into town?" Eliza asked eventually. "Once a month or so for supplies. I try to keep the trips short." "When were you last there?" 2 weeks ago. "I am due to go again in about 2 weeks." She nodded slowly. "You should be careful. If Marcus hears about a woman staying out here, he will come looking." "Let him," Isaac said, his voice flat. "He will not take you anywhere you do not want to go." Eliza turned to look at him. "You do not know him, Isaac. He is dangerous. He has men who do whatever he says, and they are all armed. So am I." Isaac met her gaze steadily. "I have not lived alone out here for years by being helpless. I can handle myself." "I do not doubt that. But handling one man in a fair fight is different from facing Marcus and his friends." She looked away, back at the sunset. "I do not want you to get hurt because of me. That is my choice to make." They lapsed back into silence, but Isaac felt the weight of her words. He knew she was right, that Marcus Webb represented real danger. But he also knew he could not simply hand Eliza over, could not let her face that alone. Something had shifted in him over the past days, watching her recover, sharing meals and conversation. She had become more than just a stranger who needed help. She was becoming important. The realization unsettled him. A week passed, then 10 days. Eliza's wound healed cleanly, the stitches holding firm, the infection fully cleared. She moved normally now, without the careful stiffness of those first days. She had also taken over most of the cooking, declaring that Isaac's attempts at anything beyond basic soup and meat were offensive to anyone with working taste buds. "I am a good cook," Isaac protested, "but without much heat." "You are an adequate cook," Eliza corrected, adding herbs to a stew that smelled infinitely better than anything he had ever made. "There is a difference." The cabin felt different with her in it, brighter somehow despite the lack of additional lamps. Warmer, though the August heat had not abated. Isaac caught himself watching her sometimes, noticing the way she hummed while she worked, the way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear when she was concentrating. He was not fool enough to misunderstand what was happening. He was falling for her, had been falling for her probably since that first moment when she opened her eyes and asked who he was. The knowledge terrified him. Isaac had been alone for so long. He had built his life around solitude, around not needing anyone or having anyone need him. It was safer that way, simpler. People left, or they died, or they disappointed you, and solitude protected against all of that. But Eliza was cracking that protection like ice in spring thaw, and he was not sure what to do about it. One evening, as they cleaned up after dinner, Eliza turned to him suddenly. "I should probably leave soon, find work somewhere, start over properly." Isaac's hand stilled in the wash water. "Is that what you want?" "One has nothing to do with it. It is what makes sense." But she did not sound convinced. "You could stay longer. You are welcome here." "For how long? Another week? Another month? I cannot hide forever, Isaac, and I cannot expect you to keep supporting me indefinitely." "What if I wanted to?" The words came out before he could stop them, too honest, too raw. Eliza stared at him, cloth in hand, dripping water onto the floor. "What?" Isaac turned to face her fully. "What if I wanted you to stay? Not as someone hiding, not as a burden, but just as someone who belongs here. With me." "Isaac," his name came out soft, almost wounded. "You do not know what you are saying." "I know exactly what I am saying. I have been alone for years by choice, and I was fine with it. But this past week and a half with you here, it has been different, better." He took a step closer. "I look forward to waking up, knowing you are here. I like talking to you, hearing your thoughts. I like the way you take over my kitchen and make food that tastes like something worth eating." I like you, Eliza, more than I have liked anyone in longer than I can remember." She shook her head slowly, but tears were welling in her eyes. "You deserve better than a runaway wife with nothing to her name. I cannot give you anything, Isaac. I am just broken pieces trying to hold together." "You are not broken. You are strong and clever and brave." Isaac reached out, touching her face gently. "You walked for 2 days with an infected wound rather than stay somewhere you were being hurt. That is not broken. That is the strongest thing I have ever heard." A tear spilled down her cheek, and he brushed it away with his thumb. "I am scared," she whispered. "Of Marcus, of this, of you, of feeling something real again." She closed her eyes. "Marcus made me believe he loved me. He said all the right things, and I believed him, and look what happened." "I am not Marcus," Isaac said firmly. "I will never be him. I would cut off my own hand before I hurt you the way he did." Eliza opened her eyes, searching his face. Whatever she saw there seemed to reassure her, because she leaned forward slowly, tentatively. Isaac met her halfway, their lips brushing in a kiss that was soft and careful and full of promise. When they parted, she was smiling through her tears. "I like you too," she said quietly. "More than I should, probably. You scared me with your kindness. Good kind of scared. The terrifying kind that might actually lead somewhere good." She laughed shakily. "I am not used to good." "Then get used to it," Isaac said, "because I intend to give you a lot of it." They kissed again, longer this time, and Isaac felt something in his chest unlock that had been closed for years. When they finally pulled apart, Eliza rested her forehead against his. "If I stay, Marcus will find out eventually. He will come here. Then we will deal with it together. But Eliza, you cannot live your life running and hiding. At some point you have to stand and face the thing chasing you. With you beside me, always." She nodded against him. "All right. I will stay, for as long as you will have me. That might be a very long time." "Good," she said, and kissed him again. The next 2 weeks were the happiest Isaac could remember. He and Eliza fell into an easy partnership, working together to maintain the homestead. She was not afraid of hard work, and she picked up ranching skills quickly. She learned to milk the cow he kept for fresh milk, to collect eggs from his small flock of chickens, to mend fences and check water supplies. In the evenings they cooked together, talked, and often ended up sitting outside watching the stars emerge. They kissed frequently, growing more comfortable with each other, but Isaac was careful not to push for more. Eliza had been through trauma, and she needed time and space to heal emotionally as well as physically. He was content to wait, to let her set the pace, but all the while, the knowledge of Marcus Webb hung over them like a storm cloud on the horizon. Isaac knew it was only a matter of time before something broke. He just did not know what or when. The answer came on a Tuesday afternoon, when Isaac returned from checking his fence line to find Eliza standing rigid at the cabin window, staring toward the south. "What is wrong?" he asked immediately. "Riders, 3 of them coming this way." Isaac moved to the window, following her gaze. Sure enough, 3 horses were approaching at a steady pace, still about a half-mile out but closing. He could not make out faces yet, but the lead rider sat his horse with an arrogant confidence that made Isaac's jaw tighten. "Is it him?" "I do not know. I cannot see well enough yet." But her voice was tight with fear. Isaac went to his gun cabinet and pulled out his Winchester rifle, checking that it was loaded. He also strapped on his gun belt, the weight of the Colt revolver familiar and reassuring. "Stay inside," he told Eliza. "No matter what happens, stay inside unless I tell you otherwise." "Isaac, please be careful." He kissed her quickly. "I will be. I promise." Then he stepped outside, positioning himself on the small porch where he had a clear view of the approaching riders. The rifle rested casually in his arms, a clear message. This was his land, and he was prepared to defend it. The riders drew closer, and Isaac got his first good look at them. The leader was a man in his late 30s, well dressed for the frontier in a dark suit and polished boots. Handsome in a sharp-edged way, with black hair and a neatly trimmed beard. His eyes, when they met Isaac's, were cold and assessing. The two men flanking him were rougher, hired muscle clearly, both armed and watching Isaac with predatory awareness. The group stopped about 20 feet from the cabin. The well-dressed man smiled, showing white teeth. "Good afternoon, friend. My name is Marcus Webb. I am looking for my wife. I heard there might be a woman staying out this way, and I thought I would check if she has been seen." Isaac kept his expression neutral. "Cannot say I have seen anyone, just me and my land out here." Marcus's smile did not waver, but his eyes went flat. "That is interesting. Because I have it on good authority that a woman collapsed at a homestead about 5 miles north of Las Vegas some weeks back. There are not many homesteads that fit that description. Plenty of open land out here. Plenty of places a person could go. True enough." Marcus shifted in his saddle. "But you see, my wife is not well. She had an accident before she left and she needs medical care. I am very worried about her. If you know where she is, it would be a kindness to tell me." Isaac's grip on the rifle tightened fractionally. "Like I said, I have not seen anyone. And if I had, I do not think I would be inclined to tell a man who calls a knife wound an accident." The pretense of friendliness dropped from Marcus's face like a mask. "So she is here." "I did not say that. You did not have to." Marcus's hand moved toward his gun, and immediately Isaac raised the rifle, sighting down the barrel at Marcus's chest. The two hired men tensed, reaching for their own weapons, but Isaac's voice cracked out sharp. "Tell them to keep their hands where I can see them, or you will be dead before they clear leather." Marcus raised a hand, stopping his men. "Easy, friend. No need for anyone to get hurt. Then you should leave my property. Now." "I cannot do that. Eliza is my wife, legally married before God and the law. She belongs to me, and I have every right to take her home." "She does not want to go with you. That means she stays here." Marcus's face darkened. "You are interfering in a marriage. That is a crime in some places. So is assault with a deadly weapon, which is what you did to her. I cleaned that wound, stitched it myself. I know what a knife cut looks like." Isaac's voice was cold as winter. "You hurt her badly, and now you want to take her back so you can do it again. That is not happening. You do not understand the situation." "I understand it fine. Now get off my land before I shoot you for trespassing." For a long moment nobody moved. The tension stretched taut as wire. Then Marcus slowly turned his horse. "This is not over," he said quietly. "She is my wife. I will have her back one way or another, and you will regret getting involved in things that do not concern you. She concerns me. That makes it my business." Marcus stared at him, his face unreadable. Then he spurred his horse and rode away, his two men following. Isaac kept the rifle raised until they were out of range, then lowered it slowly. His heart was pounding, adrenaline singing through his veins. The cabin door opened and Eliza emerged, her face pale. "He knows I am here. Yes, he will come back with more men next time, probably." She moved to stand beside him, watching the three figures disappear into the distance. "I should leave, go somewhere else, somewhere far from here. You would be safe then." Isaac turned to her, setting the rifle aside and taking her hands in his. "I do not want safe if it means you are gone. We face this together, remember. He could kill you, he could try. But Eliza, I meant what I said. I am not letting him take you, not now, not ever." He squeezed her hands. "We will find a way through this." She looked up at him, fear and hope warring in her eyes. "How, I do not know yet. But we will figure it out." That night, Isaac barely slept. He kept watch from the window, rifle across his lap, waiting for any sign of Marcus's return. But the night remained quiet and morning came without incident. Still, Isaac knew it was only a temporary reprieve. Over breakfast, he and Eliza discussed their options. They could try to get the law involved, but as Eliza had said, the sheriff was in Marcus's pocket. They could leave, head for California or somewhere else entirely, but running meant always looking over their shoulder. Or they could stay and prepare for whatever Marcus had planned next. "There is one other option," Eliza said slowly. "We could try to annul the marriage. If we went to a judge, explained what Marcus did, maybe they would declare the marriage invalid." Isaac considered that. "Would a judge believe you over Marcus? I do not know. Probably not, especially if Marcus has been spreading stories about me. He is respected in Las Vegas, owns a successful business. I am nobody, a woman who ran away from her husband. Which story do you think people will believe? The truth. The truth does not always matter when it comes to people with power and money." Eliza's voice was bitter. "But maybe it is worth trying. At least then we could say we went through proper channels. Where would we find a judge?" "There is one who comes through Las Vegas once a month to hear cases. He is due any day now, actually. If we went into town, we could petition him." Isaac did not like the idea of Eliza going into Las Vegas, not with Marcus and his men there. But she was right that they needed to try legal avenues first. If a judge would annul the marriage, it would solve a lot of problems. "All right," he said. "We will go together. Tomorrow morning, we will talk to the judge and see what can be done." Relief washed over Eliza's face. "Thank you for everything, Isaac. I do not know what I would have done if I had not found you." "You would have survived," he said with certainty. "You are a survivor, Eliza, but I am glad you found me too." They spent the rest of the day preparing for the trip into town. Isaac cleaned and loaded all his guns, and Eliza mended her dress so she would look as presentable as possible. That night, Isaac held her close as they lay in his bed together, still chaste but finding comfort in each other's presence. "Whatever happens tomorrow, we will face it together," he murmured into her hair. "Together," she agreed and held him tighter. Morning came too quickly. Isaac hitched his wagon and helped Eliza up onto the seat beside him. They brought one of his horses tied to the back, just in case they needed to leave quickly. The 5-mile ride to Las Vegas took about 45 minutes, and with every passing minute, Isaac felt Eliza grow more tense beside him. Las Vegas in 1882 was a rough frontier town, all dust and raw wood and barely contained chaos. The main street was lined with saloons, a general store, a bank, and various other businesses. People moved along the wooden sidewalks, going about their daily business. Isaac drove the wagon straight to the courthouse, a slightly more substantial building at the end of the street. Inside, they found a clerk who informed them that Judge Holloway was indeed in town and hearing cases that afternoon. They could file a petition and would be seen in turn. Isaac paid the filing fee, and they submitted their request for annulment on the grounds of abuse and abandonment of marital duties. Then they waited. The courthouse had a small waiting area with hard wooden benches. Isaac and Eliza sat together, not speaking much, both lost in nervous anticipation. Other people came and went. Cases were called, and slowly the afternoon wore on. Finally, just as the sun was starting to sink toward the horizon, their names were called. Judge Holloway was an older man, gray-haired and stern-faced, with the weathered look of someone who had spent his life on the frontier. He sat behind a large desk in a room that served as his courtroom and gestured for Isaac and Eliza to sit in the chairs across from him. "Mrs. Webb," he began, looking at Eliza over reading spectacles, You are petitioning for annulment of your marriage to Marcus Webb on grounds of abuse. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. That is a serious accusation. Do you have proof? Eliza stood and, with shaking hands, turned around and began to unbutton the back of her dress. Isaac stood immediately to shield her from the judge's view as much as possible, though he kept his own eyes averted. When she had lowered the dress enough to reveal the scar on her back, she said, "This is what he did to me when I told him I wanted to leave. He used a knife." There was a long silence. Then Judge Holloway said, "You may cover yourself, Mrs. Webb." Eliza redid her dress and sat back down, her face flushed. The judge studied her for a long moment, then looked at Isaac. "And who are you?" "Isaac Crawford, Your Honor. I own a homestead north of town. Mrs. Webb collapsed at my door some weeks ago. I cleaned and stitched that wound myself." "So you can verify the injury exists?" "Yes, sir. It was infected badly when I found her. Someone had tried to stitch it before but did a poor job. The cut was deep and deliberate, made with a blade." Judge Holloway made a note on the papers before him. "Mrs. Webb, why did you not report this to the sheriff when it happened?" "Because the sheriff works for my husband, Your Honor. He was there when Marcus cut me. He held me down so Marcus could do it." The judge's eyebrows rose. "That is another serious accusation. It is the truth." "I have no reason to lie. I just want out of this marriage so I can live my life without fear." Before Judge Holloway could respond, the door to the courtroom burst open. Marcus Webb strode in, flanked by his two hired men and, notably, the sheriff himself. "Your Honor," Marcus said smoothly, "I apologize for the interruption, but I just learned my wife was here. I wanted to address these ridiculous accusations directly." Judge Holloway frowned. "Mr. Webb, this is a closed hearing. You should not be here." "With respect, Your Honor, I have every right to defend myself against slander. My wife is not well. She has been suffering from delusions since a bad fall some weeks ago. I have been desperately searching for her, worried sick, and now I find her here making wild claims." Marcus turned to Eliza, his expression a perfect mask of concern. "Eliza, darling, please come home. We can get you the help you need." "I do not need help," Eliza said, her voice shaking but firm. "I need away from you. You see, Your Honor, she is clearly not in her right mind. That scar she showed you is from the fall I mentioned. She tripped and landed on some broken glass. I tried to stitch it myself, but I am not a doctor. Then she ran off before I could get her to proper medical care." "That is a lie," Eliza said desperately. "You cut me deliberately. You said you were teaching me a lesson about obedience. I would never hurt my wife. I love her." Marcus's voice rang with apparent sincerity. "Your Honor, I am asking that you remand Eliza into my custody so I can ensure she receives the care she clearly needs." Isaac stood abruptly. "Judge Holloway, Marcus Webb is lying. Everything Eliza has said is true. I saw that wound when it was fresh. It was not from a fall. It was a deliberate cut, deep and precise, made by someone who knew how to use a knife." "And who are you to make such judgments?" Marcus asked coldly. "Are you a doctor?" "I am someone who has stitched up enough injuries to know the difference between an accident and an assault. Or perhaps you are someone who has designs on another man's wife and is helping her concoct stories to justify breaking her marriage vows." Marcus turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, I think it is clear what has happened here. Eliza ran away from our marriage and took up with this man. Now they are trying to find a legal way to justify their adultery." "That is not true," Eliza cried. "Isaac has been nothing but honorable. He saved my life, and I will not let you slander him." Judge Holloway held up a hand. "Enough! Everyone be quiet." He looked at the sheriff, who had been standing silently near the door. "Sheriff Wilson, what do you know about this situation?" The sheriff stepped forward, his face carefully neutral. Well, Your Honor, I can tell you that Mr. Webb is a respected businessman in this town. Been here for 5 years, never had a problem, pays his taxes, runs a clean establishment. As for the accusation that I was involved in any kind of assault, that is completely false. I have never been present for any kind of domestic dispute between Mr. and Mrs. Webb. He is lying, Eliza said, but her voice had lost some of its strength. Isaac could see the hope draining from her eyes as she realized how this was going to go. It was her word and Isaac's against Marcus and the sheriff, and in the eyes of the law, she was just a runaway wife while they were respected men. Judge Holloway sighed heavily. Mrs. Webb, I understand you are upset, but without corroborating evidence, I cannot simply take your word over your husband's. The injury you showed me could have come from a fall, as Mr. Webb suggested. And while I respect Mr. Crawford's opinion, he is not a medical professional. So you are going to send me back to him? Eliza asked quietly. You are going to ignore everything I have said and send me back to a man who will likely kill me. I am going to deny your petition for annulment, the judge said. What happens after that is between you and your husband. However, Mr. Webb, let me be very clear. If I hear any reports of your wife being injured again, I will investigate personally. Do you understand? Of course, Your Honor. Marcus's smile was triumphant. I appreciate your wisdom in this matter. Come along, Eliza. Let us go home. No. Eliza stood, backing away. I am not going with you. You are my wife. You do not have a choice. She does have a choice, Isaac said, moving to stand beside Eliza. She can choose to leave with me and you cannot stop her. Actually, I can. Marcus nodded to the sheriff. Sheriff Wilson, please arrest Mr. Crawford for kidnapping and unlawful interference in a marriage. The sheriff moved forward, his hand on his gun. Mr. Crawford, I am going to have to ask you to come with me. Isaac's mind raced. If he resisted, people would get hurt, possibly including Eliza. If he went peacefully, Eliza would be alone with Marcus. There was no good option, no clear path forward. Then Eliza did something unexpected. She pulled a small derringer from her pocket, a gun Isaac had not known she possessed, and aimed it squarely at Marcus. Nobody is arresting anyone, she said, her voice steady despite the way her hands shook. Marcus, you are going to leave this courthouse and go back to your saloon. The sheriff is going to forget he saw anything, and Isaac and I are going to walk out of here together. That is what is going to happen. The room froze. Marcus stared at the gun, and for the first time since he had entered, he looked genuinely uncertain. Eliza, put that down. You are not going to shoot me. I walked for 2 days through the desert with a hole in my back to get away from you. Do you really think I would not pull this trigger? You would hang for murder. Maybe, but you would still be dead, and that would be worth it. Judge Holloway stood. Mrs. Webb, I strongly advise you to put that weapon down. This is not the way to solve your problems. With respect, Your Honor, you just told me I have no legal recourse, so I am making my own recourse. Eliza kept the gun trained on Marcus. Isaac, we are leaving. Now. Isaac did not need to be told twice. He kept himself between Eliza and the sheriff as they backed toward the door. Marcus and his men did not move, all of them watching the derringer. In the close confines of the courthouse, a shot would be devastating. They made it to the door, then out into the fading sunlight. Eliza finally lowered the gun, tucking it back into her pocket as they ran for the wagon. Isaac untied his horse and helped Eliza onto it, then climbed up himself. They spurred the horse into a gallop, leaving the wagon behind, racing out of Las Vegas as shouts rose behind them. The ride back to the cabin was hard and fast. Isaac pushed the horse as much as he dared, and Eliza clung to him, her arms tight around his waist. By the time they reached the homestead, full darkness had fallen, and both of them were breathing hard. Isaac helped Eliza down, then quickly led the horse into the barn and unsaddled it. They ran for the cabin, and Isaac barred the door behind them as soon as they were inside. For a moment, they just stood there, catching their breath. Then Eliza started to laugh, a slightly hysterical sound. "I cannot believe I just held a gun on my husband in front of a judge and sheriff. Where did you get that derringer?" "I found it in your drawer last week when I was looking for a clean cloth. I figured it might be useful." She pulled it out, looking at the small weapon. "I am sorry I did not tell you. I just thought if Marcus ever cornered me, I wanted a way to defend myself." Isaac took the gun gently and set it on the table, then pulled Eliza into his arms. "You were incredible. Terrifying, but incredible." She buried her face in his chest, and he felt her shaking. "What are we going to do? We cannot stay here. Marcus will come with every man he has. And now I have threatened him publicly. He will never let that go. You are right. We have to leave." Isaac pulled back to look at her. "Tonight. We pack what we can carry on horseback and we ride north toward Carson City. We can catch a train there, go to California or anywhere else you want. They will follow us. Maybe, but we will have a head start, and once we are on a train, we will be harder to track." He cupped her face in his hands. "Eliza, I know this is not what you wanted. I know you wanted a legal solution, a clean break. But sometimes you have to take the messy way out and sort through the consequences later. Right now, the important thing is keeping you safe and keeping us together." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I am sorry I dragged you into this. You had a good life here, and now you are throwing it away because of me." "I am not throwing it away. I am choosing something better. I am choosing you." Isaac kissed her forehead. "Now come on, we have a lot to do and not much time." They worked quickly and efficiently, packing food, water, clothing, and supplies into saddlebags. Isaac took his rifle and both his pistols, plus all the ammunition he had. He also grabbed the money he kept hidden in a coffee tin, several $100s saved over years of careful living. It was not a fortune, but it would get them far if they spent wisely. Eliza packed her few belongings, including the dress she had been wearing when she collapsed at his door, now clean and mended. She also took a shawl and some practical items Isaac suggested. Within an hour, they were ready. Isaac saddled his two best horses, strong animals that could handle a hard ride. They loaded the supplies, and he helped Eliza mount. Then he took one last look at the cabin he had built with his own hands, the life he had carved out of nothing. It hurt to leave, but not as much as losing Eliza would hurt. That decided it. They rode north through the darkness, using the stars to navigate. Isaac knew these lands well enough to travel at night, and the moon was nearly full, providing adequate light. Behind them, Las Vegas fell away into the distance. They rode through the night and into the next day, stopping only briefly to rest the horses and eat some of the food they had packed. Isaac kept checking their back trail, but he saw no signs of pursuit. Either Marcus had not yet mobilized his men, or they had managed a cleaner escape than he had hoped. By the second day, they reached the outskirts of Carson City. It was a larger town than Las Vegas, bustling with activity. More importantly, it had a train station. Isaac found a boarding house where they could rest and clean up while he made arrangements. The train to San Francisco left the following morning. Isaac bought 2 tickets using assumed names, and they boarded with their few possessions. As the train pulled away from the station, Eliza finally allowed herself to relax against Isaac's shoulder. "You think we made it?" she asked quietly. "I think we have a good chance. Marcus has no reason to think we went to Carson City specifically. We could have gone anywhere. And even if he figures it out, tracking us from here will be nearly impossible. What will we do in San Francisco? Whatever we want. Find work, start fresh. I have carpentry skills and ranch experience. You can cook and manage a household. Between us, we will figure something out." Eliza was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Isaac, I know we have been through a lot together in a short time, but I need to ask you something. Anything. When this is all settled, when we are safe and Marcus is far behind us, would you consider marrying me? Properly, I mean, once I can get a divorce or annulment or whatever is possible." Isaac turned to look at her, his heart swelling. "Eliza, I would be honored, but are you sure? We have only known each other a few weeks. I have never been more sure of anything. You saved my life, and then you chose me over everything you had built. You stood up to Marcus when no one else would. You made me feel safe and valued and cared for. If that is not love, I do not know what is." "It is love," Isaac agreed, his voice rough with emotion. "I love you, Eliza. I think I have loved you since you woke up in my bed and looked at me like I might be dangerous, but you were not going to show fear." She laughed, wiping at her eyes. "I was terrified of you. You were this big, serious man, and I had no idea what you wanted. I wanted to help. That is all I have ever wanted. You did more than help. You gave me back my life." She kissed him softly. "I love you too, Isaac Crawford, and I cannot wait to be your wife for real this time." They spent the train ride planning their future, talking about the life they would build together in California. It felt surreal, discussing such normal things after everything they had been through, but also deeply right. San Francisco was overwhelming after the quiet of the frontier. The city was huge and crowded, full of people and noise and opportunity. Isaac and Eliza found a small apartment in a working-class neighborhood and set about building their new life. Isaac found work at a lumber yard, his experience with carpentry and physical labor making him a valuable employee. Eliza took in sewing and laundry, working from their apartment. The money was tight at first, but they managed. More importantly, they were together and they were safe. Months passed. Eliza filed for divorce in California, claiming abandonment and abuse. With no way for Marcus to contest it from Nevada, and with sworn statements from Isaac about her injuries, the divorce was eventually granted. It took nearly a year, a frustrating wait, but when the papers finally came through, Eliza wept with relief. They were married 3 days later in a simple ceremony at a small church. Isaac wore his only good suit, and Eliza wore a dress she had sewn herself, pale blue with tiny white flowers. They had no guests except the landlady from their building, who served as witness, but it did not matter. What mattered was the vows they spoke, the promises they made to each other. Isaac promised to love and cherish Eliza for all his days, to stand beside her through whatever came. Eliza promised the same, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac kissed her with all the pent-up emotion of their long journey to this moment. Life in San Francisco settled into a pleasant rhythm. Isaac was promoted at the lumber yard, eventually becoming a foreman. Eliza's sewing business grew as word spread about the quality of her work. They saved money carefully, planning for a future that felt more secure with each passing month. 2 years after they arrived in San Francisco, Eliza discovered she was pregnant. Isaac was terrified and thrilled in equal measure, hardly daring to believe they were going to be parents. Eliza bloomed with pregnancy, her happiness so evident that their landlady commented on it regularly. Their son was born on a cool spring morning in 1885, healthy and loud and perfect. They named him Samuel, after Isaac's father. Isaac held his son in his arms and felt a completeness he had never known existed. This was what life was supposed to be, he realized. Not solitude and safety, but connection and love and family. Eliza was a natural mother, patient and loving. Isaac tried his best, learning as he went, and together they navigated the challenges of parenthood. Samuel grew into a happy, curious child, always asking questions and getting into harmless mischief. When Samuel was 3, they had a daughter. Margaret came into the world with less drama than her brother, a calm baby who seemed content just to observe. Isaac doted on her shamelessly, and Eliza teased him about being wrapped around their daughter's tiny fingers. By 1890, they had saved enough to buy a small house on the outskirts of San Francisco, nothing fancy but theirs. It had a yard where the children could play, and Isaac built a workshop in the back where he could do carpentry projects in his spare time. Eliza planted a garden, growing vegetables and flowers, taking pride in the beauty she created. Life was not perfect. Money was sometimes tight, and the children got sick or had accidents that scared Isaac and Eliza badly. But they faced everything together, just as they had promised, and their love only grew stronger. One evening when Samuel was 8 and Margaret was 5, Isaac and Eliza sat on their porch watching the sunset. The children were inside, theoretically getting ready for bed but more likely playing instead. Isaac had his arm around Eliza's shoulders and she leaned into him with comfortable familiarity. "You ever think about Nevada?" she asked suddenly. "Sometimes. Do you?" "Sometimes. I wonder if Marcus is still there, still running his saloon." She paused. "I wonder if he ever thinks about me. Does it bother you?" "No, not anymore. That life feels like it happened to someone else, like a story I heard rather than something I lived." She turned to look at Isaac. "This is my real life. You and the children and this home we have built. Marcus Webb is just a bad memory that gets fainter every year." "Good," Isaac said firmly. "He deserves to be forgotten." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sky turn orange and pink. Then Eliza said, "I never thanked you properly, you know." "For what?" "For staying awake that first night. For watching over me when you had no reason to care whether I lived or died. That was when I knew you were different from any man I had ever met. You gave me your bed and your food and your care, expecting nothing in return." Isaac kissed the top of her head. "I told you then you needed help. That was reason enough. It should not have been, though. Most people would have turned away, not wanted the trouble, but you stayed. You fought for me. You gave up everything to keep me safe." Her voice wavered. "I need you to know that I understand what you sacrificed, and I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for it." "You do not need to be grateful. You are my wife, the mother of my children, the person I love most in this world. Keeping you safe is not a sacrifice, it is a privilege." He tilted her chin up to look at him. "Besides, you saved me too, you know. I was just existing before you came along, going through the motions. You taught me how to live again, how to open my heart and let someone in. If anything, I should be thanking you." Eliza smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky. We found each other when we needed it most, and we were brave enough to hold on." They kissed as the sun disappeared below the horizon, the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. From inside the house, they heard Samuel call for his mother, and Margaret's laughter. The sounds of their family, their life. Isaac and Eliza stood, hands linked, and walked back into the house together. Whatever challenges tomorrow brought, they would face them side by side, just as they always had. The cowboy and the woman who had collapsed at his door, bound together by fate and choice and love that had endured through everything. Years continued to pass, each one adding new memories and new joys. Samuel grew into a thoughtful young man, interested in engineering and building things like his father. Margaret developed a talent for music, filling the house with piano melodies. Isaac and Eliza watched their children grow with pride and wonder, marveling at the people they were becoming. When Samuel was 15, he asked his father about the scar on his mother's back. He had seen it once by accident and been curious. Isaac and Eliza sat both children down and told them an edited version of the story. How Eliza had been in a dangerous situation, how she had found Isaac, how they had fallen in love and started a new life together. They kept the details age-appropriate, but they were honest about the darkness that had existed and the courage it took to escape it. "That is why you always tell us to stand up for people who need help," Margaret said quietly. "Because someone did that for Mama." "Exactly," Isaac confirmed. "We never know when we might be the person who makes the difference in someone's life." "Your mother made a difference in mine, and I hope I made one in hers." "You did," Eliza said, reaching for his hand. "You still do, every single day." Samuel looked at his parents with new understanding. That must have been scary, though, running away, starting over with nothing. "It was terrifying," Eliza admitted. "But it was also the best decision I ever made, because it led me to your father and eventually to both of you." The conversation brought the family even closer. The children understood better the strength their parents possessed, the challenges they had overcome. It gave them context for the values Isaac and Eliza had worked so hard to instill: courage, compassion, perseverance. By 1895, Isaac was managing the entire lumber yard, a position of respect and responsibility. Eliza had hired 2 women to help with her sewing business, which had grown beyond what she could handle alone. They were comfortable, not wealthy but secure, able to provide well for their family and even save for the future. Samuel graduated from school and went to work for a construction company, his skills with building and design valued immediately. Margaret continued her music studies, talking about perhaps teaching piano someday. Isaac and Eliza supported both their children's dreams, proud of the independent, capable people they had raised. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Isaac surprised Eliza with a trip back to Nevada. Not to Las Vegas, which neither of them had any desire to see again, but to Carson City, where they had caught the train that carried them to their new life. They stood on the platform where they had boarded that train so long ago, older now but still holding hands, still together. "Do you regret it?" Isaac asked. "Leaving everything behind, starting over?" Eliza looked at him, love shining clear in her eyes. "Not for a single second. Everything I want, everything I need, I have because of the choices we made. This life we built together is more than I ever dreamed possible." "Even though it started with you collapsing at a stranger's door," she laughed. "Especially because it started that way. If I had not been so desperate, so completely at the end of my strength, I might never have stopped. I might have kept walking and missed you entirely. But I fell at your door and you caught me and everything changed." Isaac pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "I am glad you fell at my door. Best thing that ever happened to me. The soup was pretty good too," she teased. "Just pretty good. I will have you know that was my best soup." "Your only soup recipe, you mean?" They were still laughing as they walked away from the train station, hand in hand, comfortable in the life they had built and the love they shared. The years continued their steady march. Samuel married a kind woman named Charlotte, and they gave Isaac and Eliza 3 grandchildren to spoil. Margaret did become a piano teacher and eventually married one of her students' older brothers, a lawyer named Thomas. They had 2 children of their own. Isaac and Eliza's house was often full of grandchildren, noise and laughter filling the rooms. Isaac built things with the grandchildren in his workshop, teaching them to use tools safely and take pride in work done well. Eliza taught the girls to sew and cook, passing down skills and recipes. The family gatherings were loud and chaotic and perfect. In 1900, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, Isaac and Eliza sat in the garden Eliza had tended for years. They were both in their 50s now, gray threading through their hair, lines marking their faces. But they were healthy and happy, surrounded by family and the life they had built. "You remember that first night?" Eliza asked suddenly. "When I woke up and you were sitting there with soup, looking like you had not slept. I remember. You looked at me like I might attack you at any moment. You were a stranger. I had just escaped from a nightmare. I did not know if I had landed in something worse. But you ate the soup anyway. I was starving, and you tasted it first, which helped." She smiled at the memory. "You stayed awake all night watching over me. Even then, I think I knew you were different. No one had ever taken care of me like that before. It was almost frightening how much I wanted to trust you." Isaac took her hand, their fingers interlacing automatically after so many years together. "I could not have slept if I tried. You were so sick, and I kept thinking you might die, and for some reason that felt unbearable. A stranger dying in my bed felt like a tragedy I could not allow. So you sat up all night with your coffee and your watchfulness, making sure I kept breathing. It seemed important." "It was important. It was everything." Eliza leaned her head on his shoulder. "That is when our story really began. Not when I collapsed at your door, but when you decided to care what happened to me, when you chose to stay awake and watch and make sure I survived." "Best night of my life," Isaac said. "Even though I was exhausted the next day. Liar. The best night of your life was our wedding night." "Well, that one was pretty good too," he conceded, and they both laughed. They sat together as the sun moved across the sky, talking about their children and grandchildren, about the plans for the week ahead, about nothing and everything. Comfortable silence filled the spaces between words, the kind of silence that only comes from years of deep companionship. As evening approached, bringing cooler air and lengthening shadows, Isaac helped Eliza to her feet. They walked slowly back to the house, his arm around her waist, her head resting against his shoulder. Inside, they prepared dinner together, moving around their kitchen with practiced coordination. They ate, cleaned up, and sat together on their porch as stars began to appear. "I love you," Eliza said softly, "in case I have not mentioned it recently." "You mentioned it this morning, and yesterday, and the day before that," Isaac smiled, "but I never get tired of hearing it." "Good. Because I plan to keep saying it every day for the rest of our lives." "That is my plan too." They sat together as night deepened around them, two people who had found each other through desperation and darkness and had chosen love every single day since. The cowboy who had stayed awake to watch over a stranger, and the woman who had collapsed at his door and found her home. Their story had begun with soup and sleeplessness, with fear and pain and desperate hope. But it had become something beautiful, a testament to the power of compassion and courage and the kind of love that endures through everything. They had built a family, a life, a legacy of kindness that would ripple forward through their children and grandchildren and beyond. As Isaac and Eliza sat together on their porch, hands linked and hearts full, they knew that every hardship had been worth it. Every moment of fear, every sacrifice, every difficult choice had led them here, to this quiet evening surrounded by the life they had created together. The past had been hard, but it had forged them into who they were meant to be. And the future stretched ahead, still full of promise, still full of love. In the house behind them, a grandfather clock chimed 9 times. Inside, the piano Margaret had practiced on as a child sat silent now, waiting for the grandchildren to come and fill the house with music again. Photographs lined the walls, capturing moments from the years that had passed. Weddings and births, holidays and ordinary days that had become precious through the simple act of living them together. This was the happily ever after that Isaac and Eliza had fought for and earned. Not perfect, but real. Not easy, but worth it. A life built on the foundation of one cowboy's choice to stay awake and watch over a stranger, and one woman's courage to trust that kindness when she had every reason not to. Their story was complete, their journey together still continuing, and every day was a gift they never took for granted. From that first night when Eliza woke to Soup and Isaac's vigilant presence, through all the years that followed, they had chosen each other again and again. And that choice, renewed daily, had made all the difference.